Can Auburn really be a top 25 team in 2025? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Welcome in our special guest joining us this week. We're doing our spring previews, going around the conference, catching up with different members of our teams, covering all the different SEC schools. And today we stop off in Auburn, Alabama. Zac Blackerby joins us to talk all things Auburn Tigers. Zac, how are you, man?
I'm good. You picked a great time to check in on Auburn. The weather has been fantastic here on the plains.
And it's weird, too. They're deciding to do ththings a little bit later this year. I saw they're not going to hit the practice field until the end of March, and then they'll do their spring game. I haven't heard yet that they're going to do a variation. We already heard Alabama's called off their television broadcast of their spring game, but sounds like Auburn still is a full go. We'll see if it's the traditional style 8-day game.
Yeah, if I had to guess, it won't be, but we haven't heard official word one way or the other. Auburn is starting later. He talked to media down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl a few weeks ago. His mindset is he wants to make it as compact as possible, which is kind of opposite of the way folks used to want to do it. And so he's going to involve, some heavy like teaching days, but they wanted to kind of, not stretch things out a ton. So we'll see if that works out or not.
For the sake of this conversation, we did hear news a couple days ago about Hugh Freeze's health, prostate cancer, but it sounds like they caught it early enough, and they say he is, expected to make a full recovery, and all that's good to go. I did think we just need to mention it, but all signs point to Hugh Freeze being good to go. However, they did say, like, if he does have to step aside for treatment or something, you have to lean on those assistant coaches. And luckily, you got some experienced staff. DJ Durkin's been a head coach before. And that was where I wanted to go with the next point, Zac. Sure. Huge to keep him, especially when you heard teams like Ohio State were calling and trying to poach him. That's the one constant. DJ Durkin, for whatever you want to say about his time at Maryland, what happened there, one thing that's been pretty consistent as a defensive coordinator in the SEC, he's been pretty damn solid.
He has been good. And, it's really easy to point out the low points of the season for the defense, because that's what fans do. You remember the highs, you remember the lows, but the reality of who you are is in that middle 80%, not the top 10% or the bottom 10%. And that middle 80% of Auburn's defense was really solid. And also when you kind of couple that with the point that they inherited bad field position from time to time, whether it was from missed field goals or special teams in general, or just the offense, not producing consistently throughout the season. I don't think Auburn's defense was consistently put into situations to succeed. And a lot of the times, Gordy, they did. So yeah, DJ Durkin, Auburn holding off Ohio State was huge.
Yeah. Again, with this unit, it's a lot of new pieces. There's a lot of pieces back. There's some senior leadership back on this team. There's some returning starters. Of course, Keldric Faulk heading into year 3 on Auburn. Everybody wants to see what he does and if he steps up as a leader. But just talk about the defense in general. What intrigues you most, and what's the biggest question in spring for you on the defense?
Yes. So, just the overall amount of talent, I think just strictly talent, not experience, not overall players today, but strictly talent. This is the most talented defense Auburn's had in a long time. You think about that 2017 defense and how special that was under Kevin Steele and what they did to, the two teams that played in the national championship that year, Auburn and Alabama. That defense was able to really shut those offenses down. I think Auburn's going to have that level of talent, especially on the back end. You look at what they're bringing back at linebacker with DeMarcus Riddick. He was nothing short of impressive, as well as, Malik Blocton in the defensive interior a year ago. A lot of these true freshmen played a ton of snaps, Gordy. That was a big thing that Auburn started pushing, as they should. I think it helped them with recruiting, saying, hey, we're playing more freshmen than anybody. And our defense was actually really, really good. And so guys like Caleb Harris coming back at safety and Jay Crawford at corner, coupled with Kayan Lee, and then you've got Keldric Faulk on the front end, like you said. Auburn's in a great spot when it comes to overall talent on the defense. I said a lot on Auburn a ton. My biggest question mark is how close to done are they when it comes to filling in the interior defensive line room? They went out and got a few guys. I think their starters are fine, but we all know how the defensive line works. And, of course, DJ Durkin and Vontrell King Williams, the defensive line coach, they want to rotate defensive linemen as anybody does in the SEC or really throughout college football for that matter. They probably need more guys on the interior unless they want to play a bunch of freshmen, which that might be the move.
One more question on the defense. DB Rayon Strader coming over from, I believe, Miami of Ohio.
Yes.
And highly thought of, but I think we were all kind of shocked this past week when one of the public services out there put out, their top 100 returning players in college football and had him as a top 10 player. Is that a little bit overrated? What are real expectations for Rayon Strader?
Yeah, well, that publication was Pro Football Focus, and their whole thing is their rankings, which is fine. I use their rankings for a lot of stuff. Rayon Strader's his ranking, he led the Ohio Valley, whatever conference they play in last year. He led them in pass deflections. And so Pro Football Focus's grading system, you get a major bump when you deflect passes. And Strader deflected a bunch of passes a season ago. And so obviously his grade is really good. I'm all about that. I'm all about them giving him some love, but I think today he's the third or the fourth best corner on Auburn's defense.
Yeah, it's just going to be. I'm fascinated to see. They think very highly of him, and let's see. Kayan Lee had some nice moments last year.
Stud.
I'm curious to see how that secondary looks, and that's kind of become the norm for Auburn the last couple of years. It feels like the secondary's kind of been a strength. Keontae Scott, a lot of different guys have come and gone, so we'll see what that secondary looks like.
Yes, Keontae Scott. No, and then another guy that's worth mentioning, Champ Anthony, who was balling, and then he got injured. So I would say Kayan Lee and Jay Crawford and Champ Anthony are probably your 1, 2, 3, and then I'd put Strader right there behind him, and then Blake Woodby, 5-star corner coming in, 5-star according to ESPN. He's a stud as well. He'll play as a true freshman. So Auburn is good at corner for sure.
More with Zac Blackerby in just a second, but want to remind you guys about a new sponsor here on Locked On SEC. That is Supply House. Look, you can get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. That is Supply House. Whether you're plumbing, HVAC, electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts, from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Go join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. Let's get to the biggest question, Zach. They have overturned that quarterback room. Yes. And yes, Deuce Knight, the true freshman, we know he's going to come in and he's not going to wear Cam Newton's number. We know that. But Ashton Daniels comes in from Stanford. But the big one, Jackson Arnold coming in from Oklahoma, got a big NIL deal, former 5-star recruit. What are the expectations for this quarterback room? And what are the expectations for Jackson Arnold?
Yeah, I think the expectations for Jackson Arnold were to come in and beat out Deuce Knight for the job. And then once you do that, you say, okay, I've got the best offensive line that I've played behind in my college career. I've got the best receiving options to throw to with Eric Singleton coming over from Georgia Tech and obviously Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson and Malcolm Simmons and Horatio Fields. Auburn has the options. Auburn has made it from a personnel standpoint where it's easy to play quarterback. They just need a guy who can go out and do it. They're going to have the receiving options there. They're going to have the offensive line there to protect you in front of you. So can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see it. The table is certainly set for Jackson Arnold. He's just got to eat.
He's going to have weapons surrounding him. That was what was lacking in Oklahoma. And the big thing was injury, right? I mean, the wide receiver room was completely injured at Oklahoma. I'm a little surprised, though, with as highly touted as Cam Coleman was last year as a true freshman. He was awesome. You know, Malcolm Simmons, Perry Thompson, like you mentioned. But to go and add Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, my concern is it too many mouths to feed? How does this work, bringing in a top receiver with some great receivers already?
It could be too many mouths to feed. And I guess we'll see the true impact of that and the concern maybe for other guys in the receiver room after spring, if that's actually a problem. But I can't imagine that it will be. I mean, Singleton, the expectations for him to be here for a year. It seems like Perry Thompson hasn't fully developed and adjusted to the speed of the college game, or at least the SEC level. And so I think some of these young guys, the Freeze Four, I think they can learn from a guy like Singleton, like they learned under a guy like KLS a year ago.
A couple more here. Jarquez Hunter was number 2 in the SEC in rushing last year. He is gone. Is there an heir apparent between Damari, Alston, Jeremiah Cobb? I know they bring in Darrell Robinson from UConn. Or is this going to be maybe running back by committee?
Yeah, it wasn't running back by committee last year, but you know, they had a Jarquez Hunter on the field. So I don't think we fully know. If Freeze's previous stops has been kind of a mixed bag as far as how he's used the running back room. And I also think the amount of touches to running backs, at least from the form of handoffs, is going to go down just because, I mean, if you're not going to use Jarquez Hunter a ton, or at least as much as you should, are you going to use these guys as much as you should? I don't know. To me, I do think Damari Alston is 1A and Jeremiah Cobb is probably 1B. And then it's going to be interesting to see who is RB3. Is it Darrell Robinson, the transfer from UConn? Is it Alvin Henderson? He broke every Alabama high school state rushing record ever his senior year. So we'll see how he kind of enters the fold this spring.
All right, Zach, last question. We know the schedule. Auburn opens at Baylor. They have road trips to Oklahoma, to Texas A&M, to Arkansas, to Vandy, but home games against Georgia, Mizzou, Kentucky, Alabama. What's the realistic expectation for this Auburn team in 2025?
Yeah, FanDuel has Auburn's win total at 7.5. They're usually all over it. So, 7-5, 8-4. I think that's kind of the ballpark we're living in. But I do think the upside is tremendous for this team. If it all comes together, if Hugh Freeze finds a quarterback that can run his offense, I think the ceiling is very high for the Tigers.
These spring practices will tell us a lot about this Auburn team and what to realistically expect from the quarterback. And if Jackson Arnold can live up to that 5-star hype, Auburn could be in for a very, very good season. He is Zac Blackerby, host of Locked On Auburn. Zach, thanks for the time as always.
Yeah, awesome stuff, Gordy.
All right, more Locked On SEC coming your way in just a sec. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Thanks to Zac Blackerby talking all things Auburn football with us as we continue our spring preview series. But we got some news and notes we got to jump into, so let's dive into it as we go around the conference. So we got to start off with Greg Sankey. If you guys missed this, Greg Sankey once again advocating for a 9-game schedule in the SEC. He was appearing on the Paul Feinbaum show on Monday, and Sankey said scheduling was part of what his group talked about when they met in New Orleans this past week with their, or 2 weeks ago, rather, with the league meetings. And he said, look, Monday, Tuesday, it was SEC athletic directors only. And we talked a lot about football scheduling. He said, I don't think it's a secret that we have to figure that out for 2026. Much of the discussion is about should we play 8 or 9 games that year. That does transition into an analysis of the college football playoff when you look at what happened the first year of the 12-team playoff. He said the decision for our schedule this year is it's going to be an 8-game schedule. Obviously, that's already set. But he said, I've said repeatedly, we wanted to actually go 3 years of 16 teams, 8-game schedule, kind of single division, if you will, under a single format for our scheduling and the expansion of the playoffs. So this was the first opportunity for our head coaches and our ADs to gather in a room and look back and talk about what happened this past year. Well, Sankey said, if you look at what had just happened this first year of the expanded playoff, he said the total number of losses was what the selection committee kind of focused on, and that's what concerned a lot of folks in his room. Moving to a 9-game schedule, Sankey did say that is his preference, but it would risk more losses for teams trying to make the playoff. So he said they got to consider all that while also not hurting the chances of multiple teams in the SEC trying to make the playoff. He said, look, try to understand how the selection committee for the playoff made decisions is really important. They focused on number of losses. How do we understand what that means for our schedule moving forward? He said, I'm one who said I really think we ought to be trying to move towards a 9-game schedule. I think it can be positive for a lot of reasons. He doesn't say money here, but obviously money with the rights fees and all that for another week of SEC games. But he said, you watch the interest around conference games, but not if that causes us to lose opportunities. Sankey did go on to say that the current state of the playoffs structure, he said, I've said repeatedly that the top fill-in-the-blank teams are my personal view and priority. It doesn't exclude other options, and it's not what we've done in the 12-team playoff, but allocations have been made. He said allocations to bring teams into the top 4 that then impact the ability of a school to be in the top 4, displace them into hosting, or a school that might host moves into traveling. He said, I have not used the word automatic bid, and that's not actually what we have right now. We have conference champion access for the 4 most highly rated conference champions. My advocacy was no concessions and no assurances in that process. Greg Sankey losing a lot of big words there. He's basically saying we need to get rid of moving those. Look, everybody can agree. It was stupid that Arizona State jumped the line. Boise State jumped the line ahead of people. Like, it shouldn't happen. The best teams should be hosting. Simple, plain, period. Sankey did say they will have another meeting to discuss future playoff expansion, but obviously, we're in the 12-team playoff, 14-team and 16-team formats still could be on the docket for later down the road. I did see Dabo Swinney. He was asked about, potentially the SEC and Big Ten getting automatic qualifying bids in a future format of the playoff. And Dabo Swinney said he wasn't going to comment on it. He said, it's whatever. He said, I don't waste time focusing on things I don't control. Whatever happens, all I know is nobody has been in the playoffs more than Clemson. 7 out of 10 years. So pretty good odds there. We'll see if Clemson can get back to the playoff this year. They'll open the season with LSU at home. Big one to start week 1. Reese Davis sounded off. He was on another duly noted podcast, and he was asked about the college football playoff potentially moving to 16 teams in 2026. Reese Davis said, no way. He said, I think it should be, but I think it's going to be 14 teams still in 2026. So that's my gut on it. I think there should be 16, and they should play a couple of rounds at home, but I'll say no way and think they stick with 14. Of course, there's a need for a unanimous vote, and that could push back any outcome for some time as all sides continue to debate. So, look, it's ongoing discussions. We'll see what happens, but look, there's an appetite for more teams in the playoff. We'll just say that. All right, let's get to some actual news, football stuff happening around the conference. And we start over at Vanderbilt as Clark Lee and Vanderbilt naming Steve Gregory defensive coordinator, Nick Lazinski co-defensive coordinator. They put out a statement, said Gregory will take charge of the defense following last season, which saw Clark Lee serve as his own defensive coordinator. This season will be Gregory's second with the Commodores. Last year, he was the team's associate DC and secondary coach. Meanwhile, Lazinski is in his 4th season at Vanderbilt. He was hired as linebackers coach originally and was later promoted to defensive run game coordinator in 2023. He will be the co-DC in Nashville. Prior to Vanderbilt, Lazinski did have 4 seasons at Notre Dame, 3 of those during Clark Lee's time there with the Fighting Irish. So Commodores took a big step forward last year, but Clark Lee saying, look, it was nice. I took the reins last year calling the defense, but going to let these guys step in and do it for me this year. So Steve Gregory, defense coordinator, Nick Luzinski, co-DC there at Vanderbilt. Did mention, I think, last week, Vanderbilt did pick up a piece on their offensive line. Transfer O-lineman Bryce Henderson signed with Vanderbilt a couple of days ago. Played the past 5 seasons for the Coyotes in South Dakota. He will have 1 year of eligibility remaining with in Nashville. So it'll be interesting to see what he does there at Vanderbilt, trying to improve that offensive line. All right, other news and notes. Over at Texas, they are reportedly targeting a former Big 12 coach for a role on Steve Sarkisian's staff. According to Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports, Texas is targeting former West Virginia head coach Neil Brown, looking for a role on Sark's staff. The specific role remains to be seen, but it would be a key addition and an interesting addition for Texas on their staff. Neil Brown had some nice years and then some not so nice years at West Virginia. So we'll see what role he will be there. And if that becomes official, that he does indeed join University of Texas. Over to Alabama, Kalen DeBoer speaking with the media at the start of their spring practice. And some big-time players dealing with some injury issues. DeBoer giving the media a laundry list of names, including Cavante Henry, Damani Jackson, Deontay Lawson, Danny Lewis, and Keon Sabb. Now, Damani Jackson, Deontay Lawson, and Keon Sabb are all considered starters last year. And 2 of those, obviously sustained their injuries while playing last year, Lawson and Sabb. But DeBoer went on to say, look, this was not expected. He did say they do have a few other guys limited right now in Justin Jefferson, Caden Proctor, and James Smith. But he said none of these injuries are surprises. Of course, Bama, like we said, began spring practice. Year 2 of the Kalen DeBoer era. A-Day will still take place at Bryant-Denny Stadium on April 12th. No TV broadcast on that game now. They did bring in Keelan Russell, a highly touted freshman quarterback, and DeBoer was asked by reporters how Russell compares to other freshman quarterbacks he's coached. DeBoer said, look, he's up there. He certainly is. He's got a long ways to go because I think that's the way he looks at it. He's excited about what this growth is going to be during the spring, but his ceiling and what he accomplished, what you can see on his high school film, he's a pretty elite quarterback coming in as a high school senior, current freshman for us. So he likes what he sees from Russell early on. He said it looks good right now, strong, moves around, just a good all-around athlete. But, of course, off-season training and conditioning and all that kind of stuff is going to matter in getting his body bigger and more physical and ready for the SEC. But Keelan Russell, a lot of people excited to see what he does in Tuscaloosa, whether that's this year or in the future. Paul Feinbaum does a weekly appearance on McElroy and Kublik in the morning. And this week, Feinbaum was on and asked about Bruce Pearl and what he's been doing at Auburn and where he ranks in the history of Auburn coaches. And Feinbaum said, look, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find very many coaches, but Bruce Pearl belongs on the Mount Rushmore of Auburn. He said, certainly got Pat Dye and Shug Jordan always at the top of that list. But Mount Rushmore has 4 people on it. And I think there is room for Bruce Pearl on that list. Of course, Bruce Pearl having a phenomenal season with the Tigers on the cusp of a 6th NCAA tournament appearance. It's led Auburn to their 3rd regular season SEC title. And we'll see if he can take them to a national championship. I think that's a lock. He's one of the greatest coaches to ever coach at Auburn if he can win it all. But Feinbaum did say national championships are where it's at. In basketball, a Final Four will probably take you farther than anything else. So, maybe he doesn't have to get all the way to a national championship. A Final Four would certainly still be an accomplishment. But we will see if Bruce Pearl can lead the Tigers all the way this year. And speaking of Joe Lunardi putting out his bracketology as we head into the final week of SEC games here in the men's side of things. And here's what he's got. He's got Auburn as a 1 seed, the number 1 overall seed. He's got Tennessee as a 1 seed. He's got Bama and Florida in as 2 seeds. He's got Kentucky as a 3 seed, A&M as a 4 seed, then Mizzou as a 5, Mississippi State as a 7, Ole Miss as an 8 seed, Vandy as a 9 seed, Georgia as an 11 seed. And then he has Arkansas in that last 4 in category. And on the outside looking in, he's got Oklahoma as the first team out and Texas in the first 4 out. So, again, some teams can make some movement here in these last couple of games of SEC play. We'll see what happens on that front. And lastly, a quick baseball note here before we wrap up. Over Tennessee, Alberto Osuna was denied his preliminary injunction and remains ineligible for Tennessee baseball. If you have followed this story, he played at Walters State Community College in 2021. He then transferred to North Carolina in 2022 and played 3 seasons for the Tar Heels, playing in 177 games. He, of course, put up some big numbers there, batted .259, drove in 140 runs, hit 45 home runs, and transferred to Tennessee. Well, the United States District Judge put out a ruling and said because the plaintiff fails to show a strong likelihood of success on his claims under the Sherman Act, his motion for preliminary injunction is denied, saying his extraordinary talents cannot alone justify the extraordinary remedy he seeks for another year of eligibility. Now, some people were thinking with Diego Pavia arguing that, NIL opportunities, JUCO level, you're at the JUCO level shouldn't affect your eligibility. But as of now, they're standing by it. And so Alberto Osuna not going to play for Tennessee anytime soon. But hey, Tennessee off to a strong start, defending national champs, 11-0. They beat Oklahoma State, Rice, and Houston in the Astros College Classic over the weekend. Pretty strong start to the year for Tony Vitello and bunch. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. We will have more spring preview series. We'll have some players joining us as well. You do not want to miss that over the next couple weeks. Some current SEC players talking spring ball with us. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out, of course, Isaac Shade and the guys over at Locked On College Basketball doing a great job over there. Andy Patton with Isaac. Don't wait for the end of March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.